Hey guys, welcome back. Excited to dive into this new module around the psychology of money. Now, I want to give you some background here because some people might think, what does this have to do with anything? I just want to understand where to invest, or I want to understand how to save in taxes or whatever. This is a foundational principle. The psychology around money, our emotions around money are what influence our behaviors. Our behaviors influence our outcomes. And so our outcomes are directly related to our emotions and our relationship with money. And I'm going to break that down in this module and really dive into some details and some exercises and things that can help you become aware of where you are with money emotionally so that you can then kind of overrule those subconscious tendencies. So to give you some background here, we kind of have to go back to a little bit of economic theory here, okay? So we're going to start by talking about rational choice theory. Now, rational choice theory was a long-standing and long-held theory within economics. If any of you took economics in college, I'm sure you talked about it. But essentially, in its basics, rational choice theory is it describes human behavior and decision-making as though humans are rational and we will optimize for our own benefit in a rational way. Okay, so as an example, if you follow this theory, you would say, hey, let's say I'm out of shape. Okay, so I'm out of shape. Rationally, the things that I would do are, number one, I would look at and audit what I eat. I would review my diet. I would look at my level of physical activity. I would review my exercise routine or lack thereof. And then I would make the changes. So I would change what I eat. I would change how I move my body. And then I would be healthy. Okay? In practice, obviously, probably many of us have been through that process and it hasn't worked. And so there's this gap, right, between what we know we need to do, because we have the knowledge, we know we need to do something, and then we just don't do it, or we don't do it consistently, or we don't do it in a sustainable way. And that's just one example. Obviously, we can look into money in the same way, right? Let's say I earn a good income, but I have high debt and I have zero savings. And so what do I do? Well, logically, I would look at my spending habits. I would review my budget. I would discover that I'm not saving anything and that I'm spending too much. I would identify the areas where I am spending too much. And then I would change those, spend less there, and divert that money to savings. And then all of a sudden, my problem would be fixed. Again, this is the very rational approach. And all of us can think through this and say, yeah, that's exactly what I should do. Or we can look at other people and say, this is exactly what they need to do. But in practice, that doesn't happen. Okay, so there's a massive gap here. Let me give you another example from one of my clients. So this is a client I had a long time ago, back when I was managing investments and I was kind of doing the traditional financial advisor thing. He was retired, had no income, from a job anymore. He had Social Security and things like that. And he went out and bought an extremely expensive home. So he qualified, but based on everything that we knew about his finances, this was a bad decision. He did not have enough money and he was going to run out of money. I mean, we'd run the calculations, we'd run the projections. He was going to run out of money well before, just only within a few years into retirement. And he insisted on buying the house. And then he also insisted on making extra payments towards the house so he could pay off the debt because he didn't want to have debt. Okay. So he bought a massive house. He was putting a ton of extra money on payments, severely restricting his cash flow, meaning he had to pull a lot of money from his retirement accounts, his investment accounts, just to live. And so as we'd run the projection, said you are going to run out of money and you may well get your house paid off, but then you will have zero money. We had this conversation 3 or 4 times over the span of a number of years, and he never changed anything. It was so frustrating and so infuriating for me because, I put the plan together and I said, okay, this is how we're going to approach this. This is how we're going to have this conversation so that we can help him make a better decision for himself. And we would get through and we would present, and we would kind of plead our case. And he would say, hey, you know what? You're right. You're absolutely right. I can see that, but I'm not going to do anything about it. And it just baffled me. I had no idea, why would you sabotage yourself in that way when the evidence and the facts clearly show that it's the wrong way to go. And that one experience really, really got me thinking about this gap from knowing to doing. And it's applied in every part of our lives, but specifically with money, what is the gap? How do we address it? How do we fill it? Okay. So that's rational choice theory. We act rationally. Okay. It was a long held belief and, theory within economics that people just act rationally. Well, along comes Daniel Kahneman. In 2002, he won the Nobel Prize for for some of his research in economics and psychology. He was one of the first to integrate economics and psychology, believe it or not. And what he found in this research completely destroyed rational choice theory. It completely destroyed it because he found that when we make a financial decision as humans, 90% of that decision is based in emotion and only 10% of the decision is based in logic. Okay, think about how ludicrous that sounds. Like from the outset, like there's no way that only 10% of this decision is based in logic, because we all feel we're very logical people and we can make very rational choices. His research shows that we're not very good at doing that when it comes to money. In fact, we're terrible at doing it. So this kind of spawned a whole field of research that is still growing and being developed, right? Called financial psychology. And a lot of people said, hey, we're going to dig into this further and figure this problem out, okay? One of those researchers is Dr. Brad Klontz. Dr. Brad Klontz, he is clinical psychologist, clinical therapist, and also a certified financial planner. So he actually has a very rare background where he understands personal finance and financial planning, very in-depth way. He has his own practice, but then he also understands psychology in a very, very deep way as well. And he has done a lot of research. He's been one of the pioneers in really fleshing out what does that gap consist of between knowing and doing. And I love his research. He's got a number of books that I'll link to down below this video. You can go check out. Very, very insightful books. But a lot of his research centers around these 4 money scripts, as he calls them, that he's kind of developed through a lot of different research and a lot of different studies. And money scripts are essentially these subconscious beliefs around money, okay, to put it simply. And he's kind of categorized them into 4, and they all have their own little flavor and things like that. So I'm going to dive into those in these coming videos. But these 4 money scripts are money avoidance, money worship, money status, and money vigilance. And as we dive into these, we all are affected by these in one way or the other. And usually there's a dominant one and then there's a secondary one. Obviously, we can be influenced by all of them simultaneously. I know I certainly am. I mean, I've gone through the work to kind of identify where I am and what that means for my own beliefs around money and therefore my behaviors and outcomes. But we're going to dive more in depth into these. And what I want to say is that this is crucial. If you become aware of these subconscious beliefs that you have about money, it doesn't mean that you have to solve them, okay? That's the crazy thing. You don't have to completely solve for these because they're very ingrained and they're very hard to get rid of. Money scripts are, I mean, they span generations. They are multi-generational. And so some beliefs that your grandparents had were passed on to your parents that are now passed on to you very early in your development, in your childhood, and they influence things in ways that you would never realize, okay? So they're very ingrained, but the good news is we don't have to solve for them. The biggest thing is we have to become aware of them. We have to become aware of which emotions are influencing which behaviors, trace them back to their origins, and then decide if those are actually true beliefs or not, or if they're true in certain circumstances and not true in others. It happens very often that those beliefs are helpful in certain situations and very unhelpful in other situations. So they're not universal truths that we believe. So as we become aware of them, we can then decide and consciously and intentionally decide if we're going to kind of pay attention to those beliefs as we are in a decision-making mode, or if we're going to set those aside as being untrue in that situation. So a lot to dive into here. I'm really excited, but I just want to stress the importance of this module. Do not shortchange this module. It is foundational to your outcomes financially and ultimately to a fulfilling life using money to enhance and make your life better. So we're going to dive right in and we'll see you in the next video.
Build your financial foundation today. Subscribe and follow to unlock the full roadmap.